on building a digital scholarship program with limited resources. This webinar has been organized by the Digital Scholarship Center's interest group of ACRL. I'm Jean Ferguson, the Learning and Research Communities Librarian at UC Berkeley and the co-convener of the DSCIG. My fellow co-convener is Pamela Locke, the Digital Humanities Librarian at San Diego State University. Today I'll be moderating our discussion, and Pam will be monitoring the chat board throughout the webinar. So please type in your questions in the chat board at any point throughout the webinar. We're going to be holding all questions until after the two presentations, and we'll also, as Sophie has mentioned, have a recording of the webinar today, and I'll send out a link to all the email lists when the recording is ready. Our interest group has put this webinar together today instead of holding a meeting at ALA Midwinter. We hope everyone who's traveling to Denver has a great conference. We will see you at ALA Annual in New Orleans in June, and we welcome you to a panel that we've organized with the newly created Digital Scholarship section titled Bridging the Gap, Supporting Subject Liaisons to Become Ambassadors for Digital Scholarship in Academic Libraries. Mark your calendars for Sunday, June 24th at 4 p.m. for our panel, and we'll send out more information about this closer to June. You can always join our email list at acr-dsc@lists.ala.org. And now on to today's program. Digital scholarship is a growing trend across a range of higher education institutions, from research-intensive universities to small liberal arts colleges. Many academic libraries are responding to the trend by creating services and spaces to support digital scholarship. But how do smaller institutions with limited resources provide broad support, particularly when there's little to no expectation of hiring multiple experts to provide services and supports across a range of areas? This webinar will explore approaches for mid-size and smaller libraries and library experts to support digital scholarship given staffing and other resource limitations. We have two wonderful presentations today from Salem State University and Gettysburg College. Our first presenters are Rupika Rasam, an assistant professor of English at Salem State University, and Susan Edwards, the University Archivist and Special Collections Librarian at Salem State University. Rupika and Susan will share their efforts to build a network of digital humanities practitioners at regional comprehensive universities. Supported with an NEH Office of Digital Humanities Advancement Grant, the network is intended to facilitate collaboration and sharing of knowledge and resources among faculty, librarians, and students across the United States at smaller universities that offer less institutional support for computationally intensive humanities projects. And now Rupika and Susan.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much to Jean and to Pam for the invitation to speak to you today. Susan and I are working at a regional comprehensive university, but there's actually some relevance for what we're going to talk about, at a range of different institutions. By definition, regional comprehensive universities, which are sometimes referred to as regional publics, refer to public four-year institutions. Typically, we have low tuition, and our institutional focus tends to be on workplace development in the local region, educating a combination of traditional and non-traditional students drawn from our local communities. And while these universities do have liberal arts programs, they're heavily emphasizing professional programs in areas like business, nursing, education, and social work.
This is Susan. Salem State presents a fairly typical case of the challenges facing similar universities, both in the context of higher education more generally, where we are increasingly starved for resources by our state legislatures. Per student funding in Massachusetts has declined by 31% since 2001, and for digital humanities in particular. These budget cuts have had a negative effect on our ability to provide services to help our often vulnerable population succeed and go on to graduate. Like most comprehensives, we are a small public university. We serve around 9,000 students, with many attending part-time. We primarily serve an undergraduate student population, though we do have several thousand grad students, mostly in professional programs. Like other regional comprehensives in proximity to urban areas, we have many students of color. We're at 35% at the moment. And we have significant numbers of students who are the first in their families to go to college. We are currently at 40%. We draw on a primarily local working class student population, which translates into few resources, both for the students and for the university itself. Like most libraries at regional comprehensives, the mission of the Salem State University Library is rooted in that of the universities. We are student-centered, teaching-oriented, and serve as a resource to advance the region's cultural, social, and economic development. Our library, which currently has 9 professional librarians, is focused on teaching. 6 out of the 9 are information literacy librarians. We also have 1 collections librarian, a digital initiatives librarian, and me, the archivist and special collections librarian. We are, needless to say, stretched quite thin. 9 librarians for 9,000 students is a woeful ratio. The number of librarians has decreased by 25% since 2008 because of resignations, retirements, and subsequent unfilled positions. Nevertheless, we are focused on creative ways to work with our students to help them meet their goals. Digital scholarship is one of these creative ways. We do this without a center or other institutional entity to support the work. Digital humanities initiatives, often in the form of centers, at R1 institutions in the U.S. are driven by interests that are less relevant to regional comprehensives. They tend to be research-focused and geared towards graduate students and faculty collaboration. At Salem State, we do not and will not have a DH infrastructure of this nature because it is largely irrelevant to the conditions under which we work. Additionally, we have few students who come to us well prepared to undertake DH work. Rather, we have an underserved student population that struggles with digital literacy and undertakes coursework with woefully insufficient computing access. Without facility with technology, students are at a disadvantage in the employment market. We have specifically pointed to these gaps to gain institutional support for our DH initiatives. The circumstances of our students' lives factor prominently as well. Because they're working to support themselves and often their families and are predominantly commuter students, their time on campus is constrained and they must use it efficiently to complete their degrees. They also do not have the disposable time or income to devote to multiple extracurricular activities, unpaid internships, or other uncompensated opportunities that their peers with more means can pursue more easily. These students, however, benefit from access to experience with digital humanities. At Salem State, we have leveraged these particularities of student life and student experience to design a DH program that suits our needs, and we have tapped into our institutional mandate for student success to gain departmental and administrative support for the program. There are also benefits to working at institutions like ours. The focus of regional comprehensive is on pedagogy. We are able to use our limited time and resources to directly help our students succeed. They get focused attention, research skills, and exposure to new technologies. The focus on pedagogy also helps to mitigate the labor imbalances that often occur in DH projects. Projects that focus on research can often lead to situations where the faculty member is the primary figure and librarians, students, and associated staff members are in service to the project and the faculty member. Projects focused on teaching tend to be more collaborative as a variety of people with different skill sets work together to create new learning experiences for students. This is crucial in an environment where faculty members have 4/4 teaching loads and limited time for research, and librarians have an important role in creating creative learning experiences for students. Regional Comprehensive also have a role as stewards of place. By focusing our efforts on our archives, we have the ability to tell many stories about our community. Our archives is a free, untapped source of material that focused on the often unheard stories of Salem. I'm sure you've heard of the 1692 witch trials and Nathaniel Hawthorne. We don't have material that focuses on these well-trodden subjects. We do have materials on Salem's history of immigration, activism, labor, and other topics. Telling these stories helps to diversify Salem's digital cultural record by giving voice to the ordinary and the everyday. So how did we create a DH program that kept our challenges and affordances in mind? And how did we do it with limited resources? Rupika and I met in a rather random way. I was a member of the University Research Committee, and she had applied for a grant. I happened to be the person who was responsible for reading and making a recommendation for her grant. We later met at a union lunch and spoke about our project. At our university, this is often the way people with similar interests, but who are located in different areas, meet. It pays to talk to a variety of people on campus. You never know who will turn out to be the perfect person to collaborate with. I eventually ended up participating in a faculty learning community that Rupika ran on digital humanities. Faculty learning communities at Salem State are focused on teaching. They bring faculty and librarians interested in a topic together to discuss ways to integrate new ideas into their classes. Rupika and I decided to use our complementary skills, my archival knowledge, and her DH experience to develop an archives-based, student-centered experiential learning internship program for undergraduates. At the same time, we envisioned a project called Digital Salem, a portal for projects produced by members of the Salem State community that shed light on the culture and history of Salem. We had initially thought of using Reclaim hosting because we have limited IT help and no systems librarian to run a server. But as luck would have it, our digital initiatives librarian joined us shortly after we sketched out the project. Because of his skill set, we were able to talk IT into paying for a cloud service for us to use. We keep costs low. We use open source software, Omeka and WordPress, along with free accounts to create timelines, 3D models, and maps. Digital Salem collocates and disseminates multiple discrete projects and serves as the home for the Digital Scholars projects. We used our own archives for several reasons. One, we were able to choose specific collections for students to use. We picked collections that had a variety of potential research questions. We limited the options to 3 collections, as sometimes having too many choices can be overwhelming for our undergraduates. 2, the students had me as the archivist available to help them go through the collections and provide context. While there was a good deal of face time with me, especially in the beginning of the project, it was a good use of my limited time. I know the collections well and didn't have to spend time learning new material to help them with their projects. And 3, students didn't have to navigate their way through finding collections at other institutions. With their often limited time because of work schedules, family obligations, commutes, etc., this was the best way to give them access to a variety of primary source material in an easy way for them. Using these methods, we are able to make the best use of our limited staff time and budget. In addition, we formed a digital humanities working group that tries to spread the word of DH across campus within our budgetary constraints. Now I'll turn it over to Rupika, who will discuss takeaways from our projects and our NEH grant.
Thank you, Susan. So our first recommendation is really to find existing resources to repurpose towards assembling a digital humanities community. So you'll hear throughout what Susan said, we were looking at what do we have in terms of materials. So we had our archives. We also considered existing structures and professional development opportunities that we could kind of fold into digital humanities work. So that was one example of that, is the faculty learning community that I ran, where I got to know Susan better, and then a faculty learning community that she and I ran together last year, where we were trying to continue using those opportunities that already existed through our Center for Teaching and Learning to find the people who may be interested in doing digital humanities work and bring them together for conversation. So, you know, we weren't really gonna find new sources of money. We weren't gonna find a magical answer to the material realities of doing this work, but we were able to look at the people we had and the resources we had access to think about how to reuse them for our goals. So when the original faculty learning community that I ran actually ended up yielding 9 participants from English and history and the library. And one of the ideas that came out of that was to think about how to use our strategic plan and take advantage of that to make the case for support for the work we were doing. So that's another takeaway, is to look at how is your institution positioning itself and how is it allocating its funds and how can you take advantage of that. So one initiative that we had access to was strategic planning grants that were intended to be cross-unit collaborative projects that you could propose funding for that met the criteria of our strategic plan. So Susan and I actually applied for a strategic planning grant to pilot this undergraduate research program that Susan described. And so that was an important infusion of $7,000, which is basically how we ended up starting our program together. Along those lines, another important way to proceed is to think about how do you look outside your department, how do you look outside your unit to leverage expertise across the university. And this is especially difficult at teaching institutions. I know as a faculty member, faculty are siloed in teaching areas and departments, and our instructional librarians are typically assigned to particular departments, and trying to cut through some of those barriers and boundaries can be particularly challenging. But Susan and I were an example of how kind of getting past that and thinking about how you can actually work together was a really useful way to build a program. Right now, we're fortunate that we have a new director for our library, Elizabeth McKeague, who is very supportive of this work and very excited about it. And she came from another university where she had been building some digital humanities initiatives as well. So now as we're moving into a new strategic planning process for the library, which is aligning with our new strategic plan for students, we're thinking about how do we also connect this work with our digital humanities programs have been doing to that. Another piece of wisdom that we've learned is to think really modularly about how we work. This is visible in the Digital Salem project that Susan referenced, which is essentially a WordPress site which links to different projects that our students have done and the faculty have done with their classes. We've thought about sort of small scale projects that people would be interested in doing using the archives, and that if we were to put them together, we would get this sort of exciting resource on Salem, and we indeed have. And so those kind of small pieces that all together are adding up to a bigger picture to challenge the master narratives of Salem has been really helpful because it's given us a framework for thinking about working in smaller steps than we often typically can sometimes think about with digital humanities projects. We also found that foregrounding and being flexible in response to student need was really important. We learned a lot the first year we ran our undergraduate research program, which is called the Digital Scholars Program. We didn't realize how ill-equipped our students were to undertake research in general. We anticipated they wouldn't have a lot of experience with archival materials, but we didn't realize that sort of at the level of how do you teach people to create arguments, let alone create an argument in a digital humanities project was a challenge. So we had to continue sort of remaining really nimble and attentive to the challenges of our particular student population and kind of iteratively design and redesign what we were doing. And that also meant sacrificing our vision of what we thought our projects would be by foregrounding the students' needs. So we kind of let go of whatever we thought our Digital Salem project would be to let it be student-led, to go based on their interests and the narratives that engage them and interest them the most, and helping them find the digital research methods that would be most useful for the research questions that they were developing. And we've also tried to think about how do we draw on existing student support and student life services at our university. So we've worked with the Career Services Center, for example, to help students think about how they can talk about the work that they've done with us in job cover letters and resumes and job searches. We're also exploring partnerships with other initiatives on campus, like our Office of Multicultural and Student Affairs and Center for Civic Engagement. And in doing so, we've discovered that, you know, even in a place that feels very under-resourced, you can find resources that exist in areas where the university has invested and then form partnerships with people. Particularly if you can keep saying this is all happening around a strategic plan topic like student success. Susan is going to actually briefly talk about the grant that we received for thinking about how do we bring together other people in similar constraints as us to work together.
Okay. Yeah, we realized that maybe our skill sets would apply to other people at regional comprehensives. And we decided to apply for an NEH grant. I don't think we expected to get it, but it's going to be a grant called Networking the Regional Comprehensives, and it's intended to bring together other micro-digital humanities practitioners at regional public universities. We face the same challenges, lack of funding, teaching over research, et cetera. And we're going to get together for a summit in the summer. There's currently a survey going on of people in other regional comprehensives to find out what issues they have, and that will inform what we do at the summit. And that will be available online, and there will be a white paper that comes out of that, as well as you see the website we're putting together to create the network. Rupsi?
Yeah, so we're hoping that particularly if you're at an institution like ours and are interested in being part of our network and interested in continuing to think with us through these issues of how can we build a shared infrastructure that can help us do what we're doing together, that you'll please get in touch with us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rupika and Susan. That's really interesting, and I will include information when I send out the link to the webinar with your email addresses if there are other regional comprehensives that are interested in joining. So now our second presenter is Janelle Wurzberger. Janelle is the Assistant Dean and Director of Scholarly Communications at Gettysburg College, and she co-developed the Digital Scholarship Summers Fellowship Program, now in its second year. So I'm going to turn it over to Janelle.
Thanks, Jean. So this is Janelle, and I'm going to talk about how a small library can support digital scholarship without a digital scholarship center or even anyone with digital scholarship or digital anything in their job title. So first, a little bit about Gettysburg College. We are in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and we're a small private residential liberal arts college with about 2,600 undergraduate students. The liberal arts colleges are kind of a rare breed in the American education system. When I say liberal arts college, I don't mean a large university that has a college of liberal arts and sciences. I mean a small school that focuses on undergraduates and provides a broad foundation in liberal arts and sciences, as well as a specialized major. And only about 2% of U.S. college graduates receive this type of education because the schools are so small. So studying for a bachelor's degree at Gettysburg is pretty different than studying for one at an ARL school. We have, or even a regional comprehensive like Rupika and Susan are at. We have very small classes, no grad student instructors, many opportunities for high impact educational experiences, and an emphasis on teaching. That we do have in common with you. Often our visitors are amazed at the kind of research our students do, and I like to quip that we don't have any pesky graduate students to get in the way of undergraduate excellence. We like to focus on our undergraduate excellence. So we have a lot going for us in terms of an environment that encourages creative teaching and doesn't necessarily emphasize high productivity publishing for faculty, which can be a top priority at other types of schools. But I still think it's important to recognize the aspects of our climate that allowed a DS program to grow, as well as the aspects that we're missing. So I want to start with the ones that we didn't have. So first off, we did not have a mandate to start a DS program from our administration, either at the provost level or certainly not at the president level. And not only did we not have a mandate, we really didn't have an understanding of what DS is or why it's important. Another thing we didn't have was faculty using DS methods in their research or teaching, at least not in a way that they recognized and labeled as DS. And we did not have space or money to construct a physical DS center. So that's a lot of negative. But here's what we did have. We have a library culture that is very centered on students and student learning. I grabbed these photos from our library Instagram account because I think they kind of give a flavor of the very student-oriented nature of our building. We also have a library dean who has fostered a culture in which all employees in the organization are encouraged to develop ideas, and she provides support for professional development that helps us have those ideas and execute them. And I truly believe that our library culture is the #1 reason that we have a library-led digital scholarship program today. In addition to that, we also had a little bit of influence from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Mellon gave Gettysburg College an undergraduate research grant a few years back, and they kept asking us where the digital scholarship was. So finally, somebody wrote it into the grant, and then once they said that they were going to do digital scholarship, there was a little bit more interest when the library said, digital scholarship, let's do it. So today we have a digital scholarship summer fellowship for students and a reputation on our campus for being the people who are ready to consult with faculty and students alike on digital humanities issues. So the centerpiece of our DS program is that summer fellowship. This is a 10-week paid summer program for rising sophomores and juniors. It's more programmatic than other summer research fellowships on our campus. There are many summer experiences that are options, but those other ones tend to be faculty mentored independent research or research that's based in our science faculty labs, where the faculty member has a research goal and the students just kind of plug into it in a very grad student kind of way. Our fellowship, in contrast, is grounded in a curriculum that is designed to introduce students to digital scholarship concepts and tools. And in addition to learning about DS, students also conduct their own research during the summer. And the expected outcome at the end of the 10 weeks is a student-created, public-facing digital research project. So what resources are needed to run a summer fellowship like ours? I picked these photos for the slide because I wanted to claim that you can run a surprisingly large portion of a digital fellowship on Post-its and whiteboards alone. But I didn't think you would actually believe me, so I'll talk about financial resources and other kinds of resources. But seriously, we use a lot of Post-its and whiteboards. So first, let me tell you what we did not need. We did not need extra technology to do this. Our dean was really surprised that we didn't request a technology budget. All the software that students used was already licensed by Information Technology, or it was freely available. Another thing we did not need was extra space. So I mentioned earlier, we don't have a DS center. We don't have any designated physical space for our DS program. But a program like ours does require some physical space. I mean, if you're going to teach workshops to students, you have to have them somewhere. But we don't have summer classes at Gettysburg College, so our library building is underutilized in the summer. We were able to use our classroom lab whenever we wanted to for structured learning sessions. Our students also worked on their own for a lot of the time, and we found that while they needed both independent workspace and group workspace, they worked in a lot of different places. They worked in the library computer lab, they worked in a library meeting room, they worked in study spaces on all floors of our 5-story building, they worked in special collections and archives, they worked outside on the library patio, they went to other buildings on campus when they needed to change of pace. Flexible space is really what worked well for us. I think if we had told them that they had to stay in one place all the time, they would have rebelled. So we did not need extra technology, we did not need extra space, but we did need some money, and we also needed the right people to pull this off. So let's talk about money first. The largest amounts of money we needed were to pay for student stipends for working over the summer and their housing cost. Our standard stipend on campus is $3,500. That's consistent with the other summer research experiences here. And summer campus housing is about $400. We did not pay for student meals except for a weekly lunch meeting. We spent a little bit of money on field trips, mostly for campus vehicle rentals and gas. And we paid for student meals when we traveled, but the bulk of what we needed was the stipend and the housing. So people are always asking me where the funding comes from. And for us, it comes from a lot of different places, both on campus and off campus. We're pretty good at scraping things together. The hardest money to find was the first batch. And after that, it was easier to get more money based on what we had accomplished in the previous round. So as you can see, the very first summer, we funded 3 summer fellows with $4,000 from our provost office and $8,000 that we scrounged from various lines within our own library budget. Then, after the end of the summer presentations that our fellows gave in 2016, the Associate Provost for Academic Technology Initiatives and Faculty Development saw those presentations and he was really impressed. So he gave us another $4,000 that was to pay our students to work with us through the following academic year. They assisted with DS needs in the library and they also helped support some classroom assignments. We really tried to incentivize faculty to create digital assignments within their courses by offering them some help from our students. And our hourly wage during the academic year for our DS fellows was $8.50 an hour, so we bumped it up a little bit from the minimum wage. So we made enough progress that our Center for Creative Teaching and Learning chipped in the next summer, and they paid for 3 of our 6 fellows. We doubled the size of our program in the second summer. We continued to use various lines from the library budget. And then based on those successes, we were able to get a grant from the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation to fund the following school year. And this whole time, we had been in communication with our campus's Director of Foundation Government and Faculty Grants. So she came to those public presentations. She was very aware of our program and of our needs to be able to continue the program. And so when she had an opportunity to nominate projects on campus to benefit from a Mellon Presidential Leadership Grant last year, she put us forward, and that was successful. So we got enough money in that grant to fund the summer fellows and the student employee hours during the academic year for the next 3 years. So I could not be more thrilled about that. It's such a relief to be able to focus on improving the program and building the program without the distraction of trying to find more money to run the program. So that's money. But even more important than money, I think, is getting the right people involved in the program. Human resources can really make or break a program like this. And as you can see by this slide, we go with the more is better approach. It has been important to our success to have an interdepartmental team of librarians who each bring their own strengths to the program. So it's important to have systems and technology people. It's important to have information literacy and instruction people. If you're going to be teaching these skills, that's really important. We found it helpful to have scholarly communications and copyright people in the mix to talk about author rights and open access and copyright. We have our special collections and archives people in there because our students often use primary sources from those collections. So our library's DS committee has representation from all of those areas, and that's the core group that oversees the summer experience. Of course, we looked around campus to see who else would be able to help make this a good experience for students. So we have partners in information technology and in computer science and the history department. And we even have a recent Gettysburg alumna who works as a user experience designer in our area. She came in and delivered a session on user experience, which our students absolutely loved. She was an art history major, and now she's working in user experience. Overall, we have 17 people who helped deliver this summer program. And in addition to those people, we like to look beyond the boundaries of our campus to make the community even more vibrant. We've had some really fruitful encounters with librarians and student fellows at Bucknell University and Lafayette College, which are both nearby in Pennsylvania. We took our students to some regional conferences, and that both exposed them to the ideas and digital specialties that we can't support here, and they also got feedback on their work. When they were ready, we found opportunities for them to present at those conferences, and for me, that's really been one of the most gratifying things about being involved in this work at all. It takes a lot of preparation and rehearsal to get students ready to present, but when they hear professionals responding to the work they do, it's just so worth it. So what's next for us right now? So I said earlier, we have already secured funding for the next 3 years, so we're not paying attention to that kind of resource issue in this moment. So what we're focused on right now is improving the 2018 summer experience. We have reviewed and tweaked our summer curriculum. We also condensed it. We've decided to try it as an 8-week experience instead of 10 weeks this summer. We are consciously trying to expand the circle of librarians who are involved in delivering the curriculum even more. We think this will be great for the students, but it will also make running this program more sustainable for us. We also just rewrote the job advertisement. We are revising our recruitment plan, and we're planning to actively recruit in even more areas than we have in the past. Our goal is to recruit the most diverse applicant pool to date, and we're looking for diversity in terms of discipline and digital approaches, as well as in the facets of personal identity that our applicants may share. So we invite you to take whatever might be helpful to you in developing your own program. One of the best things about librarians is that we know how to share. So whether you're thinking about starting a program or expanding a program, if there's anything in our curriculum that helps you do it, please use it. The URLs are right there. This is kind of a funny little story. Bucknell University started a Digital Scholarship Summer Research Fellows program in 2017, and when they began that, they started with the syllabus we created in 2016. But we were watching them, and we really liked some of the changes they made to theirs, so we're reusing some of their tweaks in our 2018 program. We really believe that sharing benefits all of our work, and we welcome it. So the URLs for the 2 summer programs that we've run so far are up there. You can find the syllabus, the student blog, the links to the final projects that they made, all of that's there. There's also a reference to a book chapter that I co-wrote with my colleague R.C. Miesler, and you can find that chapter in the book, of course, but there's also a copy in our open access institutional repository, which is also where you can find a copy of these slides if you want them. I understand the recording will be distributed also. And that is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janelle. So now we have about 15 minutes for questions and answers for our presenters. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box. So I see one from Barbara Anderson. Would you provide some examples of projects that were created at Salem? So this would be for Rupika and Susan.
Absolutely. So we've had students doing research and creating projects based on the history of Salem State University in a range of ways. So we were initially one of the normal schools for teacher training founded by Horace Mann. So we've had students who did projects on curriculum development using archival materials to look at the sort of full picture of how teacher training changed over time. We've had students working on a collection of a faculty member from Salem Normal School who went to India and China and brought back some very fascinating material and fascinating observations that we sort of jokingly call it idiots abroad sometimes, because his colonialist viewpoint on India and China is sort of fascinating. So we had students working with a digital edition of a memoir that he had written. We had students who created digital exhibits on materials like postcards that he collected, and sort of putting that in conversation with existing conversations about colonial era travel. We've had a student who worked on materials of anti-racist student activism, created a really fabulous, extensive timeline using archival materials from our African American, our Black Caucus, our Afro-Am Student Society, and our school newspaper from the late 60s and the late 70s, late 60s and early 70s. That sort of actually ended up showing that the demands our students were making in the 60s and 70s were the same demands that our current students in our group, Black, Brown, and Proud, are still making about our university. So when they held an event, and this group, Black, Brown, and Proud, held an event in the fall, they were actually using this project from our students at their event. Susan, if you want to add?
Well, there's one going on right now. There's a Great Salem Fire in 1914 that burned down a quarter of the city, and a lot of people pay attention to kind of the wealthier people whose houses burned down, but it really affected a lot of the tenements. So we're having a student do work on mapping out what buildings burned and who lived in them, using census information and directories, if they were born abroad, if they were born here, who lived there, who the landlords were, where they worked, and that kind of thing, to show a different aspect of what happened during that time. And activism is huge, I will say. That's one of the most popular topics that we have. There was a student doing LGBT activism, someone working on feminism on campus in the 70s. It's a really rich resource for people.
Great, thank you. We have another question. This is from Tamsin Mahoney Steele. Both institutions have done a great job of attracting students new to DS into the field. Do you have any specific anecdotes of how you successfully encourage students to try out DS, particularly if they were reluctant or inexperienced in using digital tools, and what won around those students? So Janelle, since Rupika and Susan just spoke, why don't you start with this question?
Sure, happy to. We shamelessly recruit to this. When I talk to people in the library, I tell them to think like a coach. Like, go out there and find those players you want and talk them into giving this a shot. We try to make the barriers to entry for this experience as low as possible. This was partly as a reaction to some of the other summer research experiences on our campus, which require a much more sophisticated level of independent research, and frankly, for students who have already forged bonds with professors such that they could ask them to be a mentor and to be around all summer, which seemed like a big barrier. So we go tell students, like, do you want to keep working on this topic? Are you interested in some kind of digital representation? If you look at the job ad that we have posted on our website, we spend a lot of space saying what digital scholarship is. And when they apply for it, they don't have to know all the answers. We just ask them to describe what they want to study and how they think, what kinds of digital tools they think they might use. They don't even have to know the exact tools they would use. When we call people in for an interview, we say, paint us a picture. What do you see in your head? What would you like to build? Let's just assume that we have the tools and that it's not too much to do in a summer. Just tell us what you want to make. And so we try to get them out of the what can I do with this tool mode and how would I like to present this information mode. And then we can pare it down as needed after that. But they don't have to have any actual experience with digital tools before they do this. They will learn the tools that are important to carry out their project over the summer. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. And then Susan and Rupika, how do you attract new students into DS?
So, we've done recruiting through English and history because we have existing internship programs, and so that's been a way of saying, hey, look, there's about something else you can do. Typically, the students who we get to work with us, they're just excited about doing something different. Although I can give you an example, I spoke to our honors seminar yesterday about potentially doing digital theses, and there was a lot more reluctance with the students about thinking about presenting research in a way other than an essay. But even just sort of showing them what was out there, showing them that there's actually scholarly communities that do this at the level of kind of the profession has helped them sort of look beyond more traditional ways of presenting research and to get interested in what we're doing.
Great. Okay, so we have another question from Marcel Laflamme. What does assessment for these programs look like? Especially for Janelle, might one measure be students undertaking digital projects in their regular coursework, even if they don't continue on as fellows? So Janelle, why don't you take that one?
Sure. Okay, so we have one kind of assessment that happens during the course of the summer fellowship. We do have learning goals for the program. Those are on our website. And we have a we were using the model of a mid-semester evaluation that faculty often use for their classes. We do a mid-fellowship check-in with students, and then at the very end of the summer, we do some other written assessments. These are more like reflections on their learning rather than testing on whether they know how to use the tools. But we look at what they say in their writing, both individually and we have a group feedback session. During the school year, when we have the opportunity to work with a class, now that we're building this program and we're advertising to faculty, hey, do you want to add a digital assignment to your course? You can collaborate with librarians and digital fellows to design that assignment, and the digital fellows can help support your students with the nuts and bolts of the technology while they're completing the assignment. When we have that kind of relationship, we can build in an assessment to see how well the students in those classes used the tools. That's not so much an assessment of our fellows who are serving in more of a TA-like way at that point, but that's an assessment of the students enrolled in the course, and those students won't have been through the summer fellowship.
Thank you. Okay, another question. This one from Kristen Garlock, and this is for Susan and Rupika. One of the speakers mentioned having the students go to career services to talk about their research. Could you please expand a little more on that as part of the process?
Susan, do you want to take this or do you want me to?
You organize that.
So our career services people are happy to come into classes and things like that and to work with students, and so we actually we don't have a class for our digital scholars program. It's run as a series of directed studies, independent studies. So we sort of just set up an event with Career Services. I went and I talked to them. I talked to them about the project the students are working on, what digital humanities is, what digital scholarship is, and then they came in and they did a resume workshop with the students, really concretely thinking about how do you translate what you did in your project work so that it's legible as a transferable job skill.
Great, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? I think that's the end of the questions that we have from the chat box. Okay. Well, I want to thank our presenters. Thank you to Susan and Rubika and Janelle. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you to my co-convener, Pamela Locke, for monitoring the chat boards. Please join us at our program at ALA Annual, and we will send out the link to the recording of the webinar when it's available. And also, I noted several different links during the course of the webinar that I'll also send with links to the digital repositories and the curriculum and things like that. So thank you, everyone.